Hello and welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today we have Jake Doerr from JakeDoerr.com. We have Kelly, what's your last name? Lapalco from,
Lapalco.
Is there anything you want to plug?
I'm part of Halcyon Theater.
All right, Halcyon on Theater. Do you have a website, halcyontheater.com?
HalcyonTheater.org.
KelseyOnTheater.org.
Halcyon
It's
Theater.
also JakeDoerrComedy.com.
Okay.
Got it?
Did I fuck it up again?
Literally everything was wrong. But that's okay. We're yes and people.
Yes, and for today's topic, we are going to be talking about comedy as we are in the world-famous Laugh Factory. And to be serious about a comedy issue, do you think that comedy is taken seriously as a form of art, both in film as a genre and as an artistic medium in general?
I don't think it's taken seriously enough in film. I think there are tons of comedies that could have been nominated for awards or should have received better reviews, but were immediately dismissed because they're comedies.
Yeah. In terms of live stuff, I think it varies a lot. Just because sometimes it can be all on equal footing as far as what the gold can be mixed in with the mediocre.
Yeah.
And I think also, there are trained theater people out there who, are not part of the comedy world either. Mm-hmm. And there might even be some kind of jealousy factor sometimes in terms of like success.
In theater? Really? There's jealousy involved?
Well, I'm talking about like people like comedians, who become successful, who maybe don't have that like theatrical training, but get into that scene.
LA. Sorry. Yes, that's true. I think that comedy people don't take as seriously as a form of art as, let's say, paintings, music, even dramatic films, because they like to think of it as silly. Let's say, if you're talking about a comedy, people would say like, well, you couldn't compare something like The 40-Year-Old Virgin to Schindler's List, within like the same form of art, which obviously you can't.
That'd be a fun challenge.
Yeah.
I'm not going to attempt it, but that'd be a fun challenge.
That would be a very good challenge.
I also think with live comedy, there's not necessarily the same end game. Like there's no definite end to being a stand-up because you could go to LA, you could go to New York, you could hope for that like TV special, and like with sketch comedy, you could end up at any number of theaters, and then with improv, you could end up never being a paid improviser. But with theater and drama, there's much more serious, like definitive benchmarks in terms of what the public can see you've achieved and where you've succeeded.
And also there's a ton of different genres and styles of comedy. Like a lot of people maybe who come to the Laugh Factory think of comedy as stand-up, or they don't think of things like improv or sketch comedy or more comedic play. And I don't know, it's just some aspects of it are not comparable. I think certain genres have limits, and some people work on certain aspects of their craft more than others. Some of them have more different strengths and different skills. That's maybe why they do stand-up as opposed to more character-driven sketch comedy. So yeah, it's hard to condense it into one specific thing. Sometimes.
Yeah, because comedy has a lot of different layers. I think like all forms of art, especially when you talk about improvisational comedy. Like the greatest thing about it is, and you covered this in your documentary. What was the name of it?
It was called Off the Cuff.
Off the Cuff.
Grandchildren of Chicago Improv. Hit me up if you want to see it.
It's a really good film.
I spent 2 years on it. But I interviewed different people in the Chicago improv scene, students and teachers, filmed a lot of shows to show all the different aspects of improv, what it does for people, because not everybody necessarily wants to, get into Second City or launch from IO to SNL, like you saw some of the characters in this movie.
Yeah, and don't think twice. It's all about like these people like who are in a comedy scene. They go from like this little improv group of their own, and then like two of them kind of get launched into Weekend Live, which obviously is a copywritten,
thinly veiled allusion to Saturday
very
Night
thinly
Live.
veiled.
So thinly veiled.
Yeah.
But I mean, everybody in that film has a different reason to be there.
Yeah.
You know, and it kind of gets into, you know, Jack is the one who gets launched, and he kind of once he does, he's kind of really holds on to the notion that improv ends and it's just a means to an end.
Yeah.
And he also, it's very much his style of comedy. I think the scene
Mm-hmm.
when he's preparing for the audition and when his girlfriend is preparing for the audition, they're both approaching the impression section so differently. You can tell that like his comedy will do great on an SNL like show because it's just about that recognizable impression and making it really weird.
Yeah.
And she was way more into like truthful, very earnest, sincere comedy.
The Katharine Hepburn impression.
The
that she was
Katharine
doing,
impression, yeah, which
Yeah.
is not what
Exactly.
they would be doing on the
She
show.
saw comedy more as, you know, when you look at a Hollywood blockbuster compared to like an independent film. You know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's like her idea of it was a form of expressionism, art, and then
Release
you know,
just for her. Like
Yeah.
it's I think they said in the film that's what saved her.
Yeah, it's like an you know, kind of veering it back to improv and how that's a form of comedy, which I think is just as serious as a form of art as anything else is.
It can be.
Yeah.
It's not always treated that way.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it can get a bad rap for people who see maybe what we call bar prov, where we see
Yeah.
you know some sometimes more skilled than other people performing, and you're like, oh, is that what improv is? I don't really like that. And then
Yeah.
it gets, you know, that's what they think it is.
Yeah.
When, as opposed to you go to an I.O. show and you see, you know, some really experienced veteran improvisers playing who've been doing it for, you know, sometimes 10 years or more, and you get to see what they can do with the art aspect of it.
Well, the interesting thing that they said in your documentary that I thought really stood out was that when they said, okay, can you explain what improvisation is, improvisational comedy, nobody could word it because there's no way to really explain what it is, which I think any good work of art, whether it be some sort of abstract, you know, Picasso or a movie that, like a David Lynch film that makes no sense, like you can't really explain it. You have to experience it.
Right.
And I think that makes it as just as high of a level as anything. And of course, there are people who do lowbrow, maybe versions of improv. We've always had that one guy in the class where you'd be doing a scene, like maybe, I'll give an example of one. I won't say who was in the class, but we were doing a scene like it was just a couple at a dinner table. And then all of a sudden, just for cheap laughs, like one of our scene partners comes up and he's like, well, here's your order of dildos. And we're like, okay, now we got to play off of that.
There's always that one guy who's
Yeah.
like, just takes a dump on your scene.
Really wants
Yeah.
to put a Trump impression in there.
Yeah.
He thinks he's really good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like everyone has to come in, be like, well, it's a beautiful day outside. It's like, you know, all these Mexicans, and you're like, what? Okay, well, you got a yes and with improv, you got to keep going.
And what I thought the Don't Think Twice did was a really good job of just kind of showing examples of that rather than kind of just talking about it. Like, there has the show when they knew the big people were
producers
going
were
to,
there,
the
yeah.
producers were going to be there, yeah. Jack just went into full showcase mode.
Yeah,
And
he-
just did an Obama impression.
Yeah.
Which I think Mike Birbiglia, as director and writer, did beautifully, showing everyone else's discomfort on stage with it, as opposed
Yeah.
to hearing the argument they could have had backstage about it. I think he does a great job of showing how the other characters felt on stage.
Yeah, they did a good job of condensing some of that dialogue and all those ideas in a really short space of time. And I think
Yeah.
they captured a lot of really, you know, true aspects of the community. There's that guy who's been teaching for a long time, a little jaded about, you know, other people's success.
He had his like little window of it, I think. Like
Yeah.
he briefly wrote for Saturday Night Live Weekend Live.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, but then like I guess not much happened from there. And then his friend just like skyrocketed there right away, and it was just like, really, you know?
There's also just gets into the aspect of Jack and his girlfriend just talking about
Yeah.
they become so disconnected because their worlds are now, I don't know, they see their worlds differently. And Jack can't seem to grasp the aspect of, you know, that his girlfriend's happy where she is.
Yeah.
Can't really accept it. I think if they had, they probably would have stayed together
Yeah.
at least a bit longer than they did.
Which was illustrated amazingly in that improv scene where they've been telling the whole premise is yes and when she does that final improv scene with him, he just says no but and keeps trying to change the direction of the scene and trying to rescue her. He
Yeah.
tried to set up the narrative himself instead of agreeing with what she was already doing.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to rescue you. She's like, no, I'm happy here in the well.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
couldn't
Oh,
see
were
that.
we supposed to say spoiler alert? Oh no.
Spoiler alert.
Oh, sorry.
Spoiler alert.
It's okay. It's an
Spoiler
independent
Go
film.
see it anyways. Whatever.
I think, yeah. I mean, the reason we're talking about this film is because it relates so strongly. Like when I saw it, like, when I saw this film, I'm like, Jillian Jacobs' character, she was kind of the embodiment of why comedy is a form of art. And, then you have Michael Keegan's character, who basically sees it as a gladiatorial sport, as they kind of like state what Weekend Live was like in the beginning when they're watching it. They're like, they're taking something that's beautiful and you're supposed to do together, and then they're turning it into a competition. And when I saw that, I thought, why are films like this, like Don't Think Twice, which I believe was probably my favorite picture this year, not on the same level as perhaps, a movie that's going to probably be some period piece starring Eddie Redmayne.
Oh, do you mean like in terms of like award recognition, not on the same level, or?
I think in terms of award recognition, and then also just being taken seriously as an audience, because unfortunately with award recognition, like when you get that little golden statue, people, Hollywood is essentially telling people, the audience, people who maybe aren't as aware about art or the cinematic universes, not Marvel, all right, but more like, the world of
doing film, like
yeah.
in general.
Yeah, like they think like, well, that's just a silly comedy. That's not serious like this movie about,
I don't think it's art, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where that misconception, so I think it kind of goes hand in hand between awards and films, and I'm just thinking, wouldn't it be great if a comedy did win Best Picture, which I'm sure some have throughout history, but not really like a ha-ha funny. And this one wasn't ha-ha funny. Obviously, we take it seriously because it was partially serious. Like
It had a lot of comedic moments, but it had a huge contrast of some very deep, dark, very sad moments.
Yeah. But like the thing is like I think, what about a straight up comedy? Could that be taken as seriously? Like obviously not something like Movie 43, but like.
Oh no, no, that was so bad.
Yeah.
I think with comedy, so much of it can be subjective.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have a drama, sad is sad.
Yeah.
Like those are much bigger, broader things that people can tune into and identify with and feel catharsis seeing that in a film. But if your style of comedy is more like British Monty Python style, and someone else prefers more like broad Adam Sandler style comedy, they're not necessarily gonna like the same comedic movie.
Yeah, although I think Don't Think Twice was able to kind of capture essences of both of those feelings, those feels in the movie.
Yeah.
All the feels?
All the feels.
Oh,
So many
yeah,
feels.
all
You'll feel
the
things
feels.
if you see this.
It was very kind of pseudo documentary-esque, like not only in the way they shot, which they film like a lot of indie films, which is like sort of handheld style, sort of bring you into the scene, into the moment, but also just in terms of how realistic they captured improv, which I've never seen any movie really capture improv the way that they do.
Yeah.
Usually they just show like a group doing a random scene, but you don't see what goes on behind that scene. And when you just see them, patting each other on the back, saying, I got your back, and doing their little exercises, just those little moments that they don't have to explain to the audience what they mean. You just get an idea of it. And you see how it connects people. And as Jillian Jacobs said, she likes staying on her lily pad. That's kind of like, it brings in a very personal question relating to improv, which is,
Why are we doing it?
yeah, you do it, but in the end, it's like we all want to get to the big stadium. We all want to get in that big sport of SNL, and then what happens, like when one person becomes successful and then another person doesn't. It ends up becoming like not that person becomes successful is like being weird, but their friends around them start to change. And I think we've all had an instance, like we don't like to admit it, mate, but there's always instances of jealousy where. You'll find out through Facebook someone got somewhere.
There are. I mean, comedians and any artists we're just sensitive people, and we're we are emotionally vulnerable a lot of the time, especially when we're putting our work out there.
Yeah.
And sometimes we share that that openness with each other, and then when someone betrays that trust, it can be difficult to recover from.
Yeah.
I think the movie does a great job of showing current opinions on comedy, because Mike Birbiglia's character has that comment that everyone loved Weekend Live when they were a kid. And then when you grow up, you realize, oh, maybe it wasn't always that great.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a current
Was
issue.
it ever great?
Yeah,
becomes
that's
the question.
a question, especially of a show that it is referencing could have been running for an extremely long time. Was it ever good?
Yeah.
And also the scene when Keegan-Michael Key's character is finally on and he writes a sketch. It's based on a scene they improvised originally in that theater.
Yeah, the
Is
big
that-
backstabbing moment. Yeah.
Is that copying? Is it, who had ownership of an improvised scene? Did he have a right
Yeah.
to copy it? Which reflects a lot of current problems that have been happening between New York and LA theaters when they are doing identical, nearly sketches.
Yeah. Well, how did you feel during that scene? Like when they show the kids who are orphans or whatever, and then it winds up on Weekend Live. Like, did you feel the same way? Like, fuck that guy,
I'm sure I would have
Yeah.
if I'm like, oh, didn't ask permission. First of all, I'm assuming that
Yeah.
wasn't the thing.
Watching
And
in
then-
the movie, I'm like, you son of a bitch. Like,
Yeah.
How low could you go with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like everything just explodes in
Mm-hmm.
their face towards
Oh,
the
yeah.
end. Like physically and like verbally.
Yeah,
Which
it's-
it's like I mean think of like all the people, and that's why I just
It was all
feel-
bottling up until that moment, and then it happens, and
Yeah.
that's why it's so surprising toward the end that things
Yeah.
change a little bit as well.
And there's a very well known it's very well known in the world of stand up that jokes get stolen, right?
Yeah.
And like we all know, do you guys know who Bill Hicks is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you know the story about Dennis Leary stealing jokes from him?
He did?
Yeah.
I didn't know that
Do you know his special No Cure for Cancer? I think this
I
is
know of the special, yeah.
Yeah, this was either right before Bill Hicks died or after he died. And basically like most of that special was just Bill Hicks's jokes repackaged by Dennis Leary. And he called it No Cure for Cancer. And someone approached him about it, some journalist, and I believe she asked him about the question, and he just didn't say anything, looked at her like he was going to kill her, and then he left. So we have stuff like that. I mean, that
Robin
does-
Williams was accused of stealing material
Yeah.
in his earlier days. Yeah.
I don't know if it was as bad as that, but who knows? And then there's
Yeah.
Carlos Mencia that I think like
Right.
everybody just knows him for stealing jokes. Take that, asshole.
Yeah.
But we're veering off topic. I'm sorry. I just loved that scene though. Where
It was. It
was just knife.
What's that? It's that moment we were just talking about where that openness, that trust is
Yeah.
violated and broken.
Yeah.
You know.
So I'm just thinking like when I see a movie like that though, and it really is in essence a comedy film. It's not just a dramatic film. Like I don't think audiences will take it as seriously as whatever is going to be coming out in October. And that's unfortunate because I think comedy, you can't always explain what it is. And there's always different levels of it. There's a vast difference between something like a Judd Apatow movie compared to a Christopher Guest film. Like complete different opposites. And every filmmaker has a certain viewpoints, I think, through comedy that they do with society, which is what filmmakers usually do. They express something about society through their films. I mean, Charlie Chaplin, for the best example I can think of is when he made The Great Dictator, which was a movie where a Hitler type of guy was just a complete bozo, didn't know what he was doing, he was a mockery. And of course there was the dramatic speech at the end, but even before that, it was basically making a whole joke out of Hitler and how he was just this guy who didn't know what he was doing. And it's kind of relevant today, that movie, when thinking about people like, and I'm going to get a little political, but Donald Trump, who's just this complete showman, and I keep waiting for that moment Trump's going to go on stage and be like, the fuck is wrong with you people? It was a joke. It was a book deal.
Well,
but
some people hope so.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like movies like that's a comedy still resonate because of their message. There's lots of comedians who have made films that are known not just for their laughs, but for what it's trying to say. And I think it's on the same level as something like a Schindler's List. I know they're completely incomparable.
Not comparable, really,
Yeah.
but with something to say.
Yes,
Right?
they,
Is what
they
you're
have
getting at.
they have a message, and they shouldn't not be taken as seriously.
Yeah. Well, the mainstream
Seriously isn't the
films
right
that
word,
can
we're
be
talking about comedy.
right. Yeah. I was just saying a mainstream film that can be harder to achieve just because there's a formula that's set and it's it works, it makes money, and they want to make money for all the money they spend on these films. So it's just a matter of what risks are we going to be able to take with films that could get out there and get this recognition.
And what about like in terms of performance? We were talking about improv. Like you got so many actors who are probably dramatic actors who go, "Oh, I don't do that comedy stuff. It's silly."
I find that unfortunate. I think between dramatic acting and comedic acting is much harder.
Yeah.
Because when you study theater, you're told to believe imaginary circumstances. And
Robin
so
Williams could do drama. Olivier could not do comedy.
Exactly.
Because in comedy,
nail on the
you
head.
have to believe ridiculous circumstances. And
Yeah.
a lot of serious actors would be like, well, I could never believe such a ridiculous thing. Well, you believe imaginary things already.
Yeah.
They might be more realistic
Yeah.
in terms of like a movie about death of a spouse, like overcoming extreme oppression, but pretending something ridiculous is not that far off.
Like an alien is living inside your house and he's your
Yeah.
best buddy and you go out and have drinks with him every weekend,
That takes a lot of commitment to that bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard thing to do. I mean, especially with improv, or not only improv, but stand-up comedy, written comedy, there's an exact science to it. And
You can't mess with that because then that ruins the joke.
yeah.
You can write long, sprawling, dramatic, moody movies, but you can't change the structure of a comedic movie.
Yeah. I think maybe you can if you do it right. But
I'm
be
sure
experimental.
you could be experimental.
Yeah. But it would be very difficult. But I'd like to see someone do that challenge, because I always say, above all else, I never talk shit about comedy directors. Like even if I think that's not true. The guys who do like epic movie and shit like that, fuck those
Like
guys.
the Scary Movie and the
Those are the Wayans brothers, I believe. Is it? I don't know. And then the guys who do epic movie, disaster movie,
those
date
ones, okay.
movie, those two blowhards, that's just that they give comedy a bad name. It's like this is why people don't take comedy seriously when you see something like Norbit, next to him. But again, that's like a bad dramatic film next to a bad comedic film. You can't help when you fail at a joke. There's nothing worse than falling flat on your face, like especially doing stand up, which I've done. I've had my horror stories. I remember going to a place once where they didn't even know they were having open mics that day for comedians. So nobody listened to a word I said, and I just left in the middle of my act. But the thing is when they see bad comedic films like that, I think that's what audiences mostly associate it with.
They assume though that's what all comedy films are.
Big, broad, and stupid.
Yeah.
When you can actually feel something,
Yeah.
get laughs and
Yeah.
it makes you think. Have you feel something else? That's what Don't Think Twice is, I think, achieved so well, balancing the two.
Yeah. And I give comedy directors so much credit because you have to keep people laughing for 90 minutes straight. That is the hardest category I think it is to direct more than any other category.
It's a long time to sustain
Yeah.
that kind of rhythm.
Yeah.
Because you can have, in a drama, you can have, the tension and release, but the comedy has to land.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once you miss and it falls, how do you drag the movie back up out of that?
My uncle, who's also a filmmaker, had thoughts on some of that too, of sustaining that and thinking, well, some of these comedians, they're more have been used to, doing more shorter sketch comedy type stuff, and it's almost seems like it would suit them better to go for more of that than to try to sustain something. But I don't know. It's hard to know who's at fault.
Yeah.
When it's such a huge collaborative effort like that.
Yeah. I will say in comedy though, one of my guilty pleasures is I love Jackass. So I love watching those movies. Who cannot, it's just absolute instinctual laughs. Now all of my opinions are garbage and it doesn't matter. But
Well, all right.
but it's true. It's subjective. We can like what we like. Like some of my favorite comedies are like some of the early Dennis Dugan films. Who does every movie with Adam Sandler. I love Happy Gilmore. I love. This is sort of like mid Dennis Dugan, but Saving Silverman is fucking hilarious.
yeah. That is a good one.
Yeah. And again, but those are like lowbrow But that's fine. I also enjoy Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, The Silence, and and of course Don't Think Twice, which isn't as like comedy, but still pretty good. But again, now when I'm thinking about comedy, first things that pop in my head is like Dennis Dugan and Judd Apatow, And I think like with stage performances or improvisational comedy, we just think of like farts and dick jokes rather than, the actual subtext.
Sometimes that's what you see a lot. A lot of people forget that improv is just a branch of theater.
Yeah.
And theater is meant to make you feel something and have something to say with the work you're creating,
Yeah.
whether
That's
it's
where
funny
it
or
came
dramatic.
from. The Spolin games. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where all improv comes from.
Yeah. It does comes from that, and sorry. But fuck, I forgot what I was gonna say. I was gonna say, oh yeah.
Well, your paper's behind you, so.
No, what I was gonna say was, do you think because comedy has such a rigorous structure to making someone laugh that perhaps like you can easily break the mold with in other forms of genres or also other mediums of art that you can't do with comedy? Like that's the reason like people don't take comedy seriously, because you can't be as experimental with it or else you won't get laughs.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree that you can't necessarily be experimental with it.
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of setting that up for someone to know what they're
Yeah.
about to see.
Yeah.
Because if they don't get the concept, I mean, Andy Kaufman is a great example of a comedian who would deliberately fuck with his audience. Can I say fuck on here? You can bleep it out.
I've said fuck so many fucking times already.
Well, fuck it.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a perfect example of comedian for other comedians, but also
Yeah.
you have to kind of be in on the joke. But I think he considered himself more of a what's the word? Not experimental artist, but
I don't want to use the word, but like a stunt performer, because he'd always pull these
kind of.
Oh, and literally stunt.
Yeah.
He did a lot of wrestling shows.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Yeah.
literally a lot of stunts.
with Jerry Lawler, yeah.
The
Yeah.
women's
Yeah.
wrestling, yeah.
Yeah, he did the women's wrestling. That's right. And then he
Yeah.
took on Jerry Lawler, and then he
Which
broke
was
his
totally
neck.
staged too.
Yeah,
so,
it must have been a soft man.
So it
or
was just a
something.
huge prank on everybody who
Yeah.
saw it.
Yeah, and you also have comedic actors who can very well do dramatic performances as well. Because I'm thinking of Jim Carrey and Milos Forman's version of Charlie Kaufman, and I think it was called Man on the Moon.
Yeah, that was a very good one.
Yeah.
That was a good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
And-
said Charlie Kaufman.
Yeah.
I think you had Charlie Chap.
Did
No,
I
he
say
did
Charlie
a movie
Kaufman?
of Andy Kaufman.
Did I say? Oh, I meant to say Andy Kaufman. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's
I do that a lot.
It's okay. Just
Words.
not confuse anyone else more than we probably already have.
They don't know our names. I don't think we confuse them anymore.
Yeah, I don't think Charlie Chaplin or Andy Kaufman's gonna give us a call anytime soon, cause they're dead.
Comedy. Sometimes comedy is awkward.
Yeah, I think that's the one reason I always had trouble watching The Office a little bit, because I just felt so bad for Steve Carell's character.
It's very
because he's so
cringe comedy.
socially yeah.
Extras as well as
Yeah.
a series where you deliberately are put in an uncomfortable situation.
Well, that's Ricky Gervais who made the original UK Office. There's still
Right.
that's
Yeah.
his style of comedy, though. Because then you
Yeah.
also get Stephen Merchant, also had another cringe comedy show of their
yeah,
own. So.
and that style's not for everybody.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very British style.
But you do have to kind of be in on the
Yeah.
joke to,
And-
deviate from the main formula of this joke about this personable joke here, this sketch about such and such. I don't know. I'm out of it right now.
It's all right. I'm
I
tired.
lose my words because I take this very seriously.
Yeah, we're talking about comedy seriously. Yes. But I would say, to take a big left turn in terms of like comedy as art, is look at one of my favorite comedies that was never meant to be one that we were talking about earlier was The Room. You want to talk about someone who tries to make a dramatic film and then just turns it into a brilliant piece of comedy in the most experimental way, where like it would take certain levels of a joke and keep adding to them without the guy even knowing. Like we were talking about the scene when what's her name in the movie? Lisa? Yeah, her mother is talking to her, and then she says, the test results came back, I have breast cancer, and then she just kind of easily blows it off by saying, oh, well, that's okay, like, you'll get through it. And then she like makes a big deal out of her boyfriend Johnny getting drunk and then beating her up. And then instead of being worried about Johnny beating her up, the mother says, well, he doesn't drink. And just like how each level of response.
It sounds like a bad improv scene with no acting.
Yeah.
I think movies like that, because I mean, there's the whole legion of like cult movies that are great because they're terrible. I mean, like Sleepaway Camp, Name of the King, like pretty much anything that Jean-Claude Van Damme ever does. Like movies that were meant to be extremely serious in a particular genre that just missed
JCVD
being
is good though.
Oh, the one about him playing himself?
Yeah.
The new one? I haven't seen that.
This is actually pretty good. Yeah. But yeah, it's like you can have movies that like I think that movie was just a great example of how you can take an improv scene and just turn it into this wonderful piece of art. And in a way he was kind of being experimental with comedy without even knowing it because he in his mind
Was not intending to make a comedy.
Yeah.
He thought it was so serious. He thought he was going to be.
But it'd be
a
great
huge
to
hit.
see someone try to do that with a movie. I don't know, like try to make something that's. I'm sure they've made entirely improvisational based films. Like,
Well, you have to take comedy
Blair Witch
seriously.
was,
You can't be laughing during your setup for a joke. Like, you have to take the comedy seriously.
Yes.
He took it too seriously. That itself is the joke.
And no matter what it is, if it's drama or comedy, whatever the genre is, if your characters aren't believable, if you don't care about the characters in some way, you're not going to care about what you're seeing.
Exactly. You can't be doing like, you can't be doing Schindler's List. And they're like, oh, we gotta hide. You gotta be serious then.
We got so many Schindler's List references going on here.
Yeah, I know.
Here's mine. I don't have one, but if I will come up with one before this is over.
Yeah.
And it will be extremely inappropriate.
Yeah. Did you ever see that?
That's the other thing of knowing what line to cross with
Yes.
drama and comedy.
Well, and also you're talking about Schindler's List.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking it's
It's a
like
fine line. Very fine line.
I wanted to find the two exact opposites of drama and comedy, and
Yeah.
I failed miserably.
It's okay. I mean, but we've seen instances of improv-based work, like the Christopher Guest films.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you-
Best of Show.
And if you go into stuff on television, I mean, there's tons of shows that are worked off of loosely outlined concepts that are comedies.
Yeah.
And they even have their own cinematic style. Like I think now a lot of them they all kind of find their style to steal off of it. And like one of them is like they're all stealing off The Office's style. Like when I saw Parks and Rec and everything else, I'm like, it's just The Office. Someone gets interviewed on the camera. The camera's going around and following people.
I mean, styles, they come and go. That's just a trendy kind of thing. It's like, now that seems a little trite. It's like, well, everybody's doing that. So what are people not doing? And that's kind of where, when in terms of my own performance art, that's what I look at with improv or sketch comedy. Like, what stuff I don't see people doing?
Yeah.
What would be fun for me to just see as an audience member and then to do?
Because no one's done a YouTube show where a bunch of people talk about something.
Not like this. We're unique, I think.
Yeah. Well, that was about all I had to say on that. So, comedy, is it as serious of a form of art as everything else, and should we take it as seriously? Should we change our societal view of it? I kind of veered that question to what I want the answer to be, but whatever.
I think we should take the
It should be taken seriously.
work should be taken seriously. The artists themselves maybe shouldn't take themselves so seriously if they do. But I mean, there's a work ethic involved, and it's a craft, and it does take time to get better at it and to acquire certain skills. And
The same if you were a musician or a painter or a dancer.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Interpretive dance, for instance. I want to see a comedic interpretive dance.
I'll do it right now.
Yeah. And now we're gonna go down to Adam Sandler level.
You're gonna put music in this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So that's about it. Please see Don't Think Twice. It's one of the best pictures of the year. We are in no way at all sponsored by Don't Think Twice. We are sponsored by the Laugh Factory, however. Cha-ching! So thanks for watching. I want to thank Kelly. I want to thank Jake. I want to thank myself. I want to thank my sound guy, Adam, and I want to thank my DP, Jeremy, who right now is on his phone. Thanks for watching, everybody. You'll probably agree, or won't.
It's one of the two.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Okay.